Hello there everybody, What Culture's Adam Cleary here, and it dawned on me the other day, right, that Marvel is not just about a change, but it's about to change in a way that it's never changed before. Like, don't get me wrong, we've had 3 entire phases of the MCU so far, but they were all building up to the same singular ending point. We were introducing characters and storylines that were all going to build up 23 movies later to Avengers Endgame, and now that we've had that and its epilogue Spider-Man Far From Home, it probably should have all just ended, but it made so much money that it couldn't even dream of it. Like, that whole overarching story finished, our 2 main characters, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, had fairly fitting endings. That should have been the end of it. So now with phase 4, we don't just have to continue it on, we kind of have to start again. And even though they have got a completely successful formula that I'm sure will serve them very well, there are several major problems they're going to have to overcome to ensure the future of the MCU. So, my name is Adam Cleary, and these are 9 biggest challenges facing Marvel Studios in Phase 4. Number 9, bringing in the right actors. I don't think this gets talked about enough these days, but at the very start of the MCU, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and Tom Hiddleston were all regarded as very risky bits of casting. This could be a whole other video in itself, but 3 of them had a relative lack of experience for movies this size, and in Downey Jr., the most experienced of the 4, he'd had, let's just say, a turbulent history. But because they were fairly unknown in certain circles, they made the part their own and they came to define these characters. But the problem now is that the MCU is one of the biggest things in the entire world. You can't just have a nobody take on a major role. I mean, I'm not calling them nobodies, I just mean, like, relatively speaking. Angelina Jolie and Kit Harington have been cast in the Eternals. There's been talk of Henry Cavill and Keanu Reeves being in talks for some part or another. But if Marvel want to continue the trend of what's made these films work so far, they've got to find the right balance between megastars and people who can grow into roles. Number 8, Juggling Legacy. Just a quick little recap for you here where things stood at the end of Endgame. Tony Stark had sacrificed his life to save everybody. Then Steve Rogers got really old and handed over the old shield. Then Thor gave the keys to Asgard to Valkyrie, and Hulk and Bruce Banner are one person, and Black Widow yeeted herself off a cliff. Now, you do all of these things because you want to open the floor to new heroes, to lesser explored heroes, to take the franchise forward, but these were arguably the most important characters in the entire MCU. Sorry, Hawkeye, and you can't just forget about them. And while, yes, their legacies will go forward, the shield is, of course, with Falcon, even though he should be called Captain America now, you can't have them hanging like specters over the future movies. You have to strike the perfect balance between not forgetting about all this stuff, not disregarding it because it's very popular, but also not just making everything a weird tribute act to it. Like, here's the thing, right? Some of these legacies are fun and interesting, but some of these legacies are the entire basis for the success of the MCU. The juggling act that comes with this is going to be tricky. Number 7, finding a threat as big as Thanos. And I don't just mean, like, get someone as hench as Thanos. The guy had, like, 6 Infinity Stones and could just batter Hulk for fun even without them. And had this, like, quite crazy but also quite logical plan to decimate half of all life in the universe, and then not only had all that, but he actually succeeded. I don't know how you get a threat like that again. Now, don't get me wrong, Marvel's got no shortage of intergalactic supervillains, like Doctor Doom comes to mind, yes, Galactus comes to mind. They should just fight Sony, for what it's worth, in my opinion, but anything that's going to be as impactful and as believable as Thanos, without just literally doing the whole Thanos thing again. 23 movies were all about Thanos' evil plan. When you think about it, the Infinity Saga was all about Thanos' evil plan. How do you do that again without just doing another 23 movies? Might have rambled on there slightly, so the TLDR version of this is we are getting another Avengers movie. I just don't know how you get another Avengers level threat. Number 6, introducing the X-Men. Now, here's the thing, right? Given that the MCU takes all of its cues and all of its inspiration from Marvel Comics, the fact that mutants have been around in that universe since literally before the birth of Christ represents a bit of a problem, because, I mean, where are they? Now, yes, some people have suggested you could just have this as a byproduct of the decimation. Like, people have started to develop mutations as an understandable result of being snapped out of existence and then snapped back into it. That does make sense, but if you do that, if you start from day one, you then just erase a decades-long moral conflict between Professor X and Magneto. Ergo, the best thing about the X-Men. Therefore, a far more convoluted, far less satisfying explanation is probably going to have to be come up with when they eventually introduce the X-Men into the MCU. I don't know how they're going to do it, but it needs to be something that simultaneously makes sense, makes them feel like a huge part of this world, which they are in the comics, but also explains where the hell they've been this entire time. Also, while we're at it, the Fantastic Four. Number 5, dealing with deeper characters. I mean, hands up here, right? Marvel have done a pretty good job so far of examining wider social issues in some of their movies. Like, it's not blatant, but there's obviously a deeper message in a lot of them, which you can choose to take home with you if indeed you like. I personally thought the Iron Man stuff with Tony Stark's mental health and the PTSD was one of the best things in the entire MCU, but given the kind of characters, the level of characters that Marvel Comics write versus the characters we've had in the films, how do I put this? Alright, this is the surface. This is them not even scratching it. We know we're going to get a Moon Knight movie who is a character in the comics who has a dissociative identity disorder, meaning most of their stories focus around mental health. And then there's Ms. Marvel, who is an American Muslim whose comics contain more socio-political insight than we've seen in the entire MCU thus far. And there's two major pitfalls with stuff like this. Either you take these ideas and you try to present them, but you don't do them justice and it kind of all gets convoluted and a bit messy, or they play it safe and they don't want to upset any of the bedwetters in the theater and just ignore them entirely. Number 4, Marvel TV. Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Inhumans, Cloak and Dagger, Runaways, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and The Defenders. These were TV shows that were, in many circles, beloved by many, many people. Some more than others, of course. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But now, they're all kind of gone because they were never really connected to the movies. It kind of feels like they didn't happen in the first place. But now that Marvel TV is no longer a separate entity to Marvel Studios, and we're going to get WandaVision and the Loki thing, and then Winter Falcon and Captain Soldier, whatever the hell they're calling that one, there's scope to bring some of these characters back in and do more substantial things with them, things that actually connect to the MCU. And the thing is, when you examine those 10 shows, there are elements that clearly did not work, but then again, there are other elements that were absolutely brilliant and should be retained at all costs. They should keep the casting of all of the Defenders because, yeah, Iron Fist sucked, but everybody in that felt like the right choice to play that part. But as with everything else on this list, the problem comes with finding the right balance. If they just reboot all of these things at once, then it's not going to feel fresh, it's not going to feel new, it's not going to feel exciting, but if they change too much, it's going to alienate a lot of the fans who enjoyed this stuff in the first place. That is, as the article suggests, a challenge facing Marvel, and honestly, I haven't got a clue where to start with that. Number 3, balancing the Disney Plus shows and the movies. And as something of a follow-on point to that last one, right, let's hypothetically say that they just revived everything. Everything you liked about Marvel TV comes to the MCU and it all integrates with the movies and it's all part of the same happy family. What's the problem with that? It's too much content. Like, WandaVision and Loki are already apparently going to tie into Doctor Strange. We know pretty much everything that ends up on Disney Plus is going to have one eye on the movies in some way or another. But if they end up with 10, maybe 15 Marvel TV series, and it all connects into a long-running movie franchise, so few people are going to watch all of that. Like, I will. I'm a loser. I've got nothing to do. I don't leave the house. But, like, I'm in the minority. And the problem with that is that Marvel cannot become reliant on everybody having seen every single thing that's been put out with the MCU. They have to find a way that if you want to consume all of it, you will be rewarded for doing so, but if you haven't got the hours, if you simply haven't got the time or the interest, you can dip in wherever you want and not feel alienated by the stuff you haven't seen. Number 2, let directors have more creative control. So, remember when Edgar Wright dropped out of doing Ant-Man and everyone was like, oh, that's bad. I mean, these things happen, yes, but Marvel have to absolutely make sure this doesn't happen again. Remember that? Hey, don't get me wrong here, Sam Raimi getting brought in to direct Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is excellent, but they should never have cast Scott Derrickson in the director's seat if they weren't going to let him see out the vision of his movie. And the reason for that, every time they've had a strong-willed director who has brought a massive slice of their own vision to the MCU, we have got the best movies in the MCU. The Afro-futurist vision of Black Panther is one of the best movies they've done so far. The bizarre, bonkers Taika Waititi brilliance of Thor Ragnarok is probably most people's favourite movie in the MCU. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, a complete roll of the dice where they went, all right, this probably won't work, but have some fun with it anyway, was brilliant as well. But then when the studio clamps down really hard on what they want the film to look like, you get Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel, which were two fine movies. They were 7 out of 10s, but they didn't really feel different or fresh. They were just by-the-numbers superhero romps. So yes, I can actually give you a solution for this. Go get some good directors, give them the intellectual property, tell them what the end point roughly needs to be in terms of what you're trying to bring in and what you're trying to connect to, and then let them have their fun. Number 1, the threat of Burnout. Yeah, this is the big one that kind of ties them all together. The plan going forward is to have 3 shows and 3 movies releasing every single year as part of the MCU banner, and you don't need me to tell you that, but that's a lot of watching. That's a lot of investment of your time. And the fact is, given what a perfect culmination of this whole story Endgame felt like it was, we simply don't know how many people are going to walk into Phase 4 and think, do you know what? I could watch another 23 movies of this. We don't know how many people are going to dip out at the end of Endgame and not come back to the MCU. And that's the whole point of these other 9 entries. These are the ways they're going to stop people getting disillusioned with stuff. If the legacy thing doesn't feel quite right, if the new characters aren't quite right, if the new films aren't very exciting, if they don't really let directors have creative control and it all feels very samey, it's not going to work. We're not going to come back for 3 more phases and do an entire saga taking us to, what, 2030? God, I'll be in my 40s. The MCU has provided us with so many amazing movies, amazing characters, amazing stories, amazing memories over the last 12 years, and embarking upon it was the most ambitious project in movie history. The only project more ambitious than it is to do it again. Can they do it? Honestly, I don't know. If you'd sat me down 12 years ago and said, will all this work? Will you be going to a midnight screening of the 23rd movie in this franchise with your emotional investment higher than it has ever been in a movie ever? I would have said, no, I don't care. I'm not a nerd. But turns out I did, and I am. But let us know what you made of it all in the comments below. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. What problems do you think Marvel could face over the next 5, 10, 15, infinite number of years? Shout them out below. And of course, don't forget, like I said, to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I've, of course, been Adam Cleary, and I will see you soon.